It's rather simple to think the days of empire are over, but in actual truth it is not. Remnants of the empire remain. Instead of a continental, planetary-wide map, it's just small islets and territories scattered across the world. It may be small, it may be minuscule, but the British Empire still remains. Just titles are changed for modern political and social reasons. Let the discussion now focus on what the English crown still lays claim to, in political form as well as actual military control. God save the king and queen. During the days of empire, these regions were actually colonies or regions, districts administered from larger dependencies. These are all called overseas territories, changed from the previous dependent territory, which referred to British rule. Now these regions are quote-unquote on the same level as Britain itself, just the British Crown protects and administers these regions. Which makes sense, most of these regions are unable or unwilling to be fully independent. Let's look at each region in question. Sovereign base areas of Akrotiri and Dhekelia. Much like the other former colonial powers, Britain kept a foreign base within its control. Upon Cyprus's independence, these two bases remained under British control. In a strategic location at the edge of Europe and the border area of the Middle East, this is of importance to British overseas interests in the region. The people are mostly mixed on the idea of this area. Much like the American presence in Japan, it was done at first with noble intentions, but then reality set in. There have been occasional protests for a return to Cyprus administration, but the British shall remain as long as the location is needed for Britain's interests. Anguilla. Geographically, though, is never much here to begin with, as the population is under 20,000. Its economy mostly revolves around tourism, fishing, and banking. A stable island, there has not been much cause for true independence, and the people as well as the local government would want to keep the status quo. Bermuda. Perhaps the most economically stable territory still in British control, Bermuda often has tourists from other former British colonies, namely Britain itself and America. Historically, it had a special status due to its close proximity to America. It's also the oldest British colony still under Britain's control. However, recent immigration trends in the 20th century have made it more Caribbean ethnic, with the African population now more than half when it was historically European-based. Although economically strong enough to be its own country, Bermuda remains under British administration for many reasons. British and Arctic territory. One of the few regions that has no permanent population, this region is a true relic of empire, taking land just for the hell of it. Mostly research personnel reside within the Antarctic region, although Argentine claims overlap the region. British Indian Ocean Territory. This territory has quite a bit of controversy behind it, as there is a lot of strategic interest in this atoll archipelago. The native people being forcefully removed during the late 1960s and early 1970s for a joint British-American base. It's actually quite large with 4,000 people there at the moment, originally a British outpost and later reinforced by the Americans against any Soviet actions in the Indian Ocean. Its current situation is ongoing, with the native people actively campaigning for a return to their homeland. British Virgin Islands. Another tourist haven, it's a mostly peaceful location, although it's reliant on the United States economy, even using the American currency. Much like other territories, there is no real campaign for true independence. Cayman Islands. With a population size nearly that of Bermuda, it's a major tourist destination and offshore financial center. Not much real desire for true independence, although the illegal Jamaican population is sizable. The Falkland Islands. The most controversial of all the territories, it's also the least populated. The only British possession in South America. It's had grief with the Spanish and Argentine governments throughout the centuries because of the proximity to the South American mainland. The Argentine government claims the Falklands from Spanish colonial charters, even though most of the Falkland Islanders want to remain British subjects. The Argentine claim also persists due to the Argentine government wanting to colonize the islands with its own people. As I once told a British friend, the Falkland Islands will always have the shadow of Argentina nearby, and the only way to permanently avoid any further claims will be to incorporate the Falklands into the British Union itself. How else will the British keep the Argentines away? It's similar to America bordering the former Spanish colonies, a constant headache and annoyance. Gibraltar. Speaking of Spain, there's another British colony right at the southern tip of España itself. Part of Spain for thousands of years, it was not until the Spanish succession wars of the early 1700s did the British capture the region with Dutch assistance. Multiple referendums have had the people wanting to remain under British sovereignty, as politically the situation is just as heated as the Falkland dispute. Montserrat. One of the lesser-known islands in the Caribbean, it's a peaceful and relatively small population. The former capital, Plymouth, was evacuated because of volcano concerns. A sizable portion of the island is under constant volcano warnings, and the entire island may have to be someday abandoned. Bakarin Islands. Home to the descendants of the mutineers of the Bounty, a real-life event that has been retold in books, documentaries, and movies, is one of the smallest locations on the planet, 47 kilometers or a little over 18 square miles. The population is less than 100, and it's unsurprising that this island will never have full independence. It's not possible, the landmass is just too small. Stories of incest and underage sex is common from the islands. St. Helena, Ascension, and Tristan da Cunha. Internationally known as the location Napoleon Bonaparte was exiled to after his failed vision to conquer Europe, these islands are peaceful and in between the chaotic African and South American continents. The combined population of all three islands is under 10,000, so it's another territory unable to defend itself. Previously called St. Helena and the Dependencies, essentially because only Helena had any notoriety because of Napoleon, the other islands were just nearby. South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, the most distant islands under British control, no permanent population due to the remoteness and harsh climate. All population is researchers and government officials. Also claimed by Argentina, the British had to fight the Argentines to keep control of the islands during the Falkland Islands War. Britain claimed these islands in 1775 and Argentina claimed them in 1927. Here's something for you to think about. The British claims over these islands are so old that the claim was announced when America was still a British colony and Argentina was still a Spanish colony. Turks and Caicos Islands. Another of the British territories in the Caribbean, it's the only one that has actually thought about independence, in a manner of speaking. The Caicos government actually was in talks with the Canadian government to join the Canadian Federation as an actual Canadian province, but the idea later fell through. What will the future hold? Who knows? CrownDependencies. Unlike the overseas territories which have voluntarily remained under British control, these regions are placed within a different category of British control. Firstly, these regions have been in English, later British control since the 13th century, predating the discovery of the New World as currently agreed on by international experts. Secondly, these regions have had a far more complex history with England than the modern colonies turned territories, and thirdly, administration is different in some methods of rule. The Channel Islands. Despite being near the border with France, Jersey and Guernsey have been under English and later British authority for most of its history. The American state of New Jersey is named for the bailiwick of Jersey, the Isle of Man. Perhaps the oldest of all the possessions of the English crown, the Parliament claims to be the oldest continual government parliamentary body in the world.